Yeah, Elden Ring is good and all. But have you played Tunic? 2022 has really, just started, and we already have been blessed with a bountiful amount of games. Pokemon, Ollie Ollie World, Dying Light 2, Cyberpunk 2077, For Real This Time, Nobody Saves the World, Sifu, Ghostwire Tokyo, Kirby, Horizon Zero Dawn, which is proof that you can have bad timing twice, and Elden Ring. Elden Ring being the big one of the bunch. So much so that pretty much every game that comes out for the next foreseeable future has this, tainted, unfortunate stain. Unwanted as it may be to the developers, simply because it was released during a point of time where Elden Ring is going to be consuming the lives and minds of so many gamers worldwide. It's been out for over a month, and I still can't stop seeing posts about it on Twitter. The memes are aplenty, and I'm not here to tell you that the game's not good. It's incredible. But I'm telling you, here and now, do not sleep on Tunic. If you have no context and you're just looking at random gameplay footage of it, then you might just say it looks like a graphically lush Zelda-like with an adorable little fox guy instead of Link. There are hints of Dark Souls, sure, with the dodging and all. There appears to be elements of puzzle solving, sword swinging, and look, he even has the green tunic. One might go as far even as to say,
shameless.
And I tell you that you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. And I'm here to tell you that Tunic is so much more than what it seems at first glance. At the time of me writing this review, there are 941 reviews on Steam, and for a game with this much love, passion, dedication, and near mastery of execution, Tunic should have at least quadruple this. Hopefully by the time that this review is done and published, it will. If I could summarize Tunic into a bullet point formed list that I could spout from my mouth in less than a minute to hopefully intrigue you into giving this game a chance, here it is. Tunic is an NES Zelda Wind Waker Ico Inside Souls-like. Now I know that's a lot, because it is, but that's because this game manages to touch on so many little things that mesh into one nearly perfect experience, and it still somehow manages to become something other than all of those other games. There is no game in that brief cacophony of mouth vomit that I spewed into your ears that Tunic is too similar to, except of course, maybe the NES Zelda. I just gotta tell you about Tunic, man. Right from the start, Tunic shows you a brief look at the overworld, and then you wake up on a beach, and you and your little fox friend, who I will now affectionately refer to as Nick, can begin your journey. The world of Tunic is presented as an incredibly charming, presentable, and fascinating area to explore and conquer. The game's beautiful graphics are probably the first thing you'll notice, with their lush appearance and downright whimsical style. Shadows of trees dance on the ground, patches of thick grass bob and weave around you as you walk through them, waterfalls purge over the side of hills and cliffs with the thick dreamlight liquid spilling into the rivers and oceans below, producing soft clouds of mist that always tantalize you with pondering if something lies just beyond them. Underground dungeons and caves feel equally designed and barren respectively, and as you continue to delve into the world of Tunic, you find these strange monoliths protruding from the ground, hinting at this strange technology figuratively and literally just underneath the surface. Many of the game's puzzles and pathways are gated by the strange power surging under the dirt and rubble of Tunic, and as you venture forth further and deeper still, you begin to gain a reverence for the world around you. Plodding around through decrepit, destroyed monasteries and cathedrals, passing over the graves of heroes before you with a sort of grace, rarely felt through a video game. It feels like you, yourself, not just Nick, are really prodding through old religious grounds, intervening with something interfering with the legacy left behind. Playing through Tunic at times feels like you're stepping into nostalgia itself and playing pretend in your own backyard. Enemy designs are varied and simple, but equally distinct and mechanically separate. You have your standard sword-swinging moblin equivalent, but you also find neat little variants of long-ranged enemies, frog guys, little crabs, big crabs, strange technological turret things that leave behind what can only be described as tuning forks, and much, much more. Each one of these enemies has a distinct and varied enough moveset to keep you on your toes, which is, in my opinion, one of the most surprising things overall about Tunic. It's deceptively difficult. Not slam your desk and do this to your controller, but difficult enough to make you go, oh, come on! Are you shooting my balls off? Fuck! When the game starts, Nick doesn't have a whole lot of health or stamina, so you have to make do with his very limited abilities, and you soon find out that if you run out of stamina, not only does it take a little bit before it starts to recharge, but damage is exponentially dealt to you while in a weakened state. So it quickly becomes a priority to learn the ins and outs of the game's combat mechanics, which, in my opinion, are probably the weakest aspect of the game. And it's not because they're necessarily, bad, but because they are both a little too simple and also not implemented to the best that they could be. So, in Tunic, you have a couple of attack options. You have your standard swinging fare, which generally is a 2-swing combo that can be linked to a 3rd stab for maximum damage. You also have a dodge roll attack option, which can be triggered by hitting both the attack button and the dodge button simultaneously. Now, in Tunic, unlike Dark Souls, just swinging your sword around causes no loss to your overall stamina, but this dodge roll attack is the exception. It takes quite a hefty chunk of your little green bar away, but it also does the single most amount of damage of your attack arsenal. It's a satisfying give and take mechanic, but both of these attack options present a problem. The first is that the way that most enemies react to being hit by your first initial double swipe is that they tend to be launched back a little bit away from you. This normally would be fine, as it's a nice visceral reaction to see what happens, but the problem that it poses is that it makes your third strike, should you attempt to go for it, almost useless, as the enemy will be launched far enough back to make Nick's third stab miss a majority of the time. Now, this isn't necessarily a terrible thing, as obviously the game must have been designed around this, because the best way to counter this issue is by throwing yourself deep into the enemy's bubble before you begin your combo. This will make your 3-chain combo much more likely to hit, but that doesn't stop the issue from feeling sort of awkward and slightly mishandled. The other attack option is the aforementioned dodge roll swipe, and while this is a much more reliable source of damage as the move will most likely hit the target you're locked onto, the issue with this is that, at least from my experience, it just doesn't work half the time. Now, and this is a shame because the way that the game seems to want you to use it is as a get out of jail card kind of attack, but with a cost. The amount of stamina used by this attack is not something to abuse because at the beginning of the game you could only reliably use it about once before being unable to exhaust the amount of stamina needed to use it a second time. Because it is such a big stamina sink and damage output attack, it is not uncommon to want to rely on it as a finisher or maybe even an opening attack, especially on weaker enemies. But when trying to use it as a get out of jail attack, it's incredibly unfortunate when the attack just doesn't seem to work and you're left either dodging with no follow-up or just swinging your sword far enough away from any enemy that you're only slashing oxygen instead of flesh. You are able to counter a lot of these issues as the game progresses with special items that you get, such as an incredibly satisfying ice magic dagger that will freeze most enemies that you hit for a short period of time, which allows you to land a few free hits on them. There's also a fire rod staff that essentially acts as the game's bow and arrow Zelda equivalent, and Tunic balances all of these special items by mitigating all of them to a single magic meter, which is something you'll have to manage between the game's save points. That all being said, these few combat issues are not nearly enough for me to deter you from playing this game, and the combat overall feels fine. Boss battles especially feel incredibly satisfying. mostly because they don't resort to swarming you and are huge one-on-one encounters. And then, like I said previously, you can work your way around these small niggling issues pretty easily and focus on what Tunic does well. The game has dungeons, of course, just like any Zelda and Souls-like, but Tunic's focus is less on puzzles and more on strict navigation, more akin to the Dark Souls inspiration than the Zelda one. As you explore the world of Tunic, you are constantly finding pathways that are inaccessible and simultaneously finding new areas that magically loop back around to old ones that had always been accessible from the start of the game, but they were obscured by the game's isometric camera. If you missed the feeling of euphoria that realizing that Dark Souls' interlinking world meant that the undead parish connected back to the Firelink Shrine, then you just need to stop the video and just fucking play Tunic, because the entire game is filled to the brim with those moments. It practically feels like the team that made Tunic designed the entire game around feeling that moment over and over again. The thing about Tunic compared to a game like Zelda, however, is that unlike a world built around puzzles, the world of Tunic is the puzzle. And the way that Tunic goes about making the world itself the puzzle is, in my opinion, the single coolest aspect about Tunic and why it stands so far and above many of its contemporaries. And that is the strategy guide mechanic. Growing up in the 90s meant that at some point in my life, as someone who played video games whenever I could get the chance to, that is, I ran into the seemingly inevitable reality of strategy guides and instruction manuals. And not to sound like a boomer who is literally a foot away from the grave, but one of the beautiful things in life as a wee young boy was the majestic nature of driving home from the GameStop with a brand new game on the drive home and tearing open that box and looking at the game's instruction manuals and seeing the limited selection of the game's items and enemy types, maybe even given a hint on how to deal with said enemy types with the occasional map of a level or two. Driving home with these manuals really let your imagination wander and bounce all over the place. You really felt like you were getting a preview of the adventure you were about to set out on, because you really were. And because I was a near brain-dead baby child, I often had strategy guides for a lot of the more complex games that I had growing up, like Super Metroid, Earthbound, Luigi's Mansion, Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, and a lot more. And what these books did was not only made sure that you were able to make it through the game reliably, but with some of them, like the Ocarina of Time strategy guide, some were written as if you found an old scroll and were reliving a tale told through time. It was something that I don't know if I can really quantify exactly in the words, but I can only tell you that reading these strategy guides while playing the respective game, or in my free time, or even before bed, that it was something truly special. And Tunic, in a brilliant move, has an entire mechanic in the game dedicated to the act of rekindling this old school aspect of video games. From the very start of Tunic, pretty much the first thing that you find is a little white paper in the middle of a strange gold square. Once you take it, you find out that it's a few pages of instructions. So it's not unreasonable to suspect that this is just the way that the game tells you how to play it. If this was all the mechanic turned out to be, it would be cute at best. But it quickly becomes apparent that these few pages are just part of a bigger book entirely. Through the course of Tunic, you find pages of maps, detailed art explaining enemy types, item descriptions, but so much of the game's pages are deliberately brilliantly disguised by this made-up language that prevents you from fully understanding everything that you're reading. You have to combine symbols and images in your head and on the pages to fully understand what's being told to you. And this is such a good idea because it gives Tunic the opportunity to have its cake and eat it too. It manages to give you just enough information without feeling sparse, and also manages to give a strategy guide a sense of mystery and discovery that honestly fits in well with the 90s revival game design and feel that the game is obviously striving to emulate. And as you wander around the world, you find yourself referring back to the maps that you found, and because of this, you'll find certain corners tucked away that are normally hidden from the camera. You'll find secret shops, hidden pathways, and more. I found myself scanning over the pages with a fine-tooth comb over and over again, scratching my head and feeling like a 10-year-old kid under the glow of my monitor that felt like an old CRT. Checking back over and over and over to these pages that were telling me so much more than the game itself ever would. And the game does well to balance secrets between the game's instruction manual and legitimate secrets that are hidden from you completely. In fact, I didn't realize until near the very end of the game that there are destructible walls a la Zelda until I accidentally blew one open while trying to kill an enemy. I checked the map afterwards and that wall was not indicated whatsoever via the manual. But then you discover something interesting. You find a page detailing a mechanic that would be hidden to you otherwise, and you're shown Nick using said mechanic. This begins the tumble down the rabbit hole of discovery that Tunic excels at. The game quite literally unfolds before you and spoon-feeds you the adventure bit by bit. You'll find yourself checking page numbers and seeing item descriptions referring to certain pages that you may or may not have yet. This simple twist in what would otherwise be a somewhat cute at best idea makes the entirety of Tunic stand out and becomes not only a central mechanic of the game, but the emotional center of Tunic. There are so many points throughout my playthrough where I found a page that told me some sort of information that pertained to something that I was stumped over earlier, and I had this beautiful aha moment. Tunic, in all of its surface level appearance and simplicity, is hiding so much depth and brilliance of design that, to be honest, it's kind of shocking. I was having moments of majestic revelations over and over and over again, from the pages of the game's manual to the brilliance of the game's world design. And I am not a game designer, but I am fascinated by game design. And for the overall world design of Tunic, I will say this. You know a game world is brilliantly designed when just walking around through it, you can't help but feel that the team behind it had all of the ideas laid out and just knew what to do with it. The world of Tunic, the overworld especially, feels so expertly crafted that it seriously feels both completely natural and designed at the same time. Perfectly tuned with your slow unfolding of the instruction manual and in turn your knowledge of the game. The world of Tunic is marvelous, joyous, intense, majestic, and beautiful. All of these things combine to make the world of Tunic an incredible one to navigate. You grow to care not only about Nick and his quest, but the world of Tunic itself. The reverence you feel for the world becomes one that you connect with deeply, and during a certain point in the game, you are given a weapon that within the context of Tunic feels wrong, and you almost don't want to use it out of respect for the game world. But not everything really is as it seems in the lush world. And another incredible thing to add on to the list is that Tunic pulls the rug out from under you, where the reverence and respect that you've grown to attach to everything around you is put into question. And, at least for me, I genuinely felt betrayed. It's a masterful bit of world-inlaid storytelling, and one certain level specifically left my mouth agape and muttering to myself in disbelief at what I was looking at. The last thing that I'll touch on is the game's music. Unsurprisingly, it has been the music you've been listening to throughout this video, and I think it goes without saying that it's simply wonderful. Coinciding with the game's graphics themselves, the music of Tunic is as lush as it is whimsical. Occasionally dipping its toes into the epic themes of action and heroism, but mostly staying in the lighthearted, thought-provoking, the meditative, and serene. The music is one of the single best OSTs I've heard to a game in an incredibly long time. Arguably up there in terms of the impact of the music relative to the gameplay among the greats of the medium. I could say more, but honestly, saying more would rob you of the experience of experiencing Tunic. There is still so much left for you to uncover, to find, to discover. I hope that what I've said has interested you to check out this game because I believe the small team behind it deserves your time. I've known about this game since it was announced in 2017, and I've been looking forward to it ever since. To actually get my hands on the full thing and not only have it live up to the expectations that I had for it, but it also exceed them is a special feeling. And I want to refer back to what I said at the beginning of the video. The shadow of Elden Ring looms deep and wide in the gaming world, but Tunic stands out proudly among the games released under its omnipresent and foreseeable far-reaching influence. If you ask me, both Tunic and Elden Ring fill the same satisfying niche of gaming mechanics and overall mechanical goals. Both advocate for the sense of exploration, discovery, and both succeed better than a lot of games have in the past 5 years. Both have a similar sense of tactical combat, and both fill you with a sense of wonder. I've said previously that I feel that Elden Ring is magic, condensed into 60 gigabytes. If Elden Ring is magic, then Tunic is childlike wonder condensed into 2 gigabytes. I felt feelings I hadn't felt in a long time while playing Tunic, and it rekindled my love for strategy guides, searching for clues, and a predetermined guide of discovery alongside a journey clouded in mystery, all designed by a team that cared to put in the effort to make sure that so many aspects sung to the brightest chorus possible. Now go buy Tunic. The developers deserve it.
Tomato is a fruit, but it's also a vegetable.
So we're going to look to see if Tunic has more reviews. Let's see, where are we at? 1679. That ain't enough, baby. Buy this game.